A ti también, Mónica. Y nosotros seguimos echando un vistazo al dato macro de la jornada, ISM, y vamos a contar en los próximos minutos con el presidente, concretamente, de ese instituto, del instituto ISM Manufacturero. Estamos ya con Timothy Fiore, Chair at ISM Manufacturing PMI. Timothy, thank you so much for being in Negocios Televisión. It's a pleasure to speak to you.
Yes, good afternoon, Marta.
Well, ISM was down to 46.7 points in the manufacturing sector. Timothy, why is this? It is far away from the 50 points that the market was expecting. So why is this data so low with respect to the data that we were expecting, 50 points?
So we're 5 months into a contraction period from that 50 point that you mentioned. This number came in lower than I thought that it was going to come in, and it came in lower than the economists thought it was going to come in. And the primary reason for that, I think there's really two. The first is that our demand is still weak. After 7 or 8 months of working on over-ordering and backlog, we're now at a position where our panelists are a bit concerned about their planned manufacturing output over the next 3 to 6 months. We did a forecast back in November, December of last year, where we thought the first half of the year would be what I would call lumpy. And this is definitely lumpy, but I think we've seen a shift here in sentiment around what does the rest of half one look like, and maybe more importantly, what does the beginning of half two look like? So a couple of points here. Let me make a couple of points for you. We've had a 3 or 4 point decline since October of last year. That's a pretty weak decline, what you could easily call a soft landing. We're now at a 46 and some change. That's the lowest level that we've had since the recovery began. And with the backlog being burnt off and worked on and shipped, that backlog is running out. The 4 indexes that I use to look at demand, the first one is new orders, down to 44. The second one is new export orders. We're down to 47.6, with signs that Europe and China are weak. The third thing that I look at is the amount of inventory that the panelist companies have in their facilities, and we're now at the low end of just right, which is not really positive for the future. And the last I look at is the backlog number, and the backlog reversed the point of softening in February and is on a decline, faster decline in the month of March compared to February. So I'm not really expecting demand to come back in the near term at this point. I think the demand number in March is a true demand, and the true demand just really isn't there. We've had panelists comment that lead times are improving. Our price level is relatively stable. It's contracting slightly, but in the last couple of months, it's moved a couple of points. It kind of says that our pricing is about where everybody wants it to be. So, and let me make the last comment here, and then we'll get into some more questions. The big thing for me, there's 2 things. The first thing is that there's been a real concern about liquidity in the event that the manufacturing economy does decline faster. With our manufacturing inventory number coming down to 47 and some change, that's a very serious move, and that was a big surprise for me. I figured it would be at 50, 51, 52. 47 really means that our companies are getting ready to manage their liquidity much more so than they have in a very long time. The second thing is, and because they don't want to invest money in inventory that they can't convert. The second thing is on the employment side, we've been running pretty much for every 3 companies, 2 of them are hiring and 1 is not. In the month of March, that number came close to 1 to 1. So that's a very big change too since the pandemic recovery began. And that, coupled with the fact that our panelists are trying to make sure that they stay liquid by not having inventory that they can't use, indicates to me that they're getting ready for the next 3 to 4 months of a much more tougher period.
Timothy, do you think this data is signaling that the US is closer to a recession? Because you just spoke about soft landing. Do you believe that the Federal Reserve has managed to achieve a soft landing, or that we're going into a recession in the US?
So, Martha, I think the bigger question is a soft landing appropriate to meet the moderate to long-term goals of the Federal Reserve? I think we've been on a soft landing. I've been saying that for about 8-9 months. And even at a 46.3, that's a pretty that's a soft weakening. Remember, 50 it says that we're the same month to month. 46.3 is about a 10 to 15% reduction. So it's not. Then that's why I watch the numbers at 45 or less, because to me, if a sector or the entire manufacturing industry is contracting at 45 or less, that's much more serious. So in the month of February, we were running at only 10% of our the industry output at 45 or less. In the month of March, that number hit 24, 25%. So it nearly doubled, it more than doubled, which is very similar to the month of January. So to me, the 45 number is a real break point, but at 46.3, you're not far from that. So I think I can't predict a recession, but I think what the numbers are saying is that we have a prolonged period here of contraction in the manufacturing sector that most likely is not going to end at the end of Q2. It's probably going to continue into Q3.
You mentioned some factors of the index. You mentioned, for example, I think you mentioned new orders, but which factors are contracting the most in this month, in March, and why is it?
So the new order number is contracting the most at 44.3. Remember, 50 is the same month to month. 44.3 indicates that we're contracting. We've had 7 straight months of contraction in the new order level. The lowest we got to was 42.5 in the month of January, I think it was, which was a serious number. But then in the month of February, we came back to 47, which was a positive number. It meant that we were slowing our contraction. And now we're back to 44.3. Now, we do seasonally adjust the new order number, but if you look at the non-seasonal adjusted numbers, they're not that far off from the seasonal adjusted numbers. It's within a point at the PMI level. So it kind of says to me, and then if you look at that compared to they're cutting manufacturing inventory so that they remain liquid, and they're starting to seriously address the headcount because they're not as optimistic about the near term. That says to me that the manufacturing sector is getting ready to go into a longer period of either weak contraction or slow growth.
Timothy Fiore, Chair at ISM Manufacturing PMI, thank you so much for being here. It was a pleasure to speak to you today. Thank you.
Thanks, Martha.
Bueno, nos decía el presidente del ISM, del Instituto